two things. One, do you see a difference between an embargo and conditioning certain weapons on, withholding some weapons? I mean, embargo technically means zero weapons.
No, it's
right?
a very good point, and language matters. And I do think actually, the more I do think about this, and I'm glad you raised this issue, because conditioning aid comes across much better. It's much easier to sell. It's actually something that was part of the Democratic Party conversation in 2020. If you remember, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders both came out for conditioning aid for the first time in 2020. Even Pete Buttigieg, who by then had moved into the centrist lane, came out for conditioning aid to Israel, because there's a certain rationality to it, right? We're gonna sell you weapons, and we're gonna put conditions on it, which you would assume is done by any government in the world when they sell weapons.
We have them too. I mean, they're already in place,
we
right?
have
The
regulations. Well, Leahy laws is like the end point. We just have basic regulations to begin with when you sell anything to anyone. And then, yes, you have the Leahy laws. And by the way, Patrick Leahy, retired senator from Vermont, was asked recently, is this in violation of the law you passed? And he said, yeah. So like the guy whose name is on the law is saying we're violating the law. Multiple State Department officials who have quit the administration, like Josh Paul and others, have said we're in violation of the law. So it's very easy for Harris to come up with a case that doesn't make her sound pro-Palestinian or anti-Israel, and just say, I'm applying the law. We're going to apply the law. We're going to look at the law. We're going to apply the law. We're going to condition aid. We're going to make sure that Israel has a right to defend itself from evil Iran and evil Hezbollah. But we're not going to give them 2,000-pound bombs or even 500-pound bombs to drop on schools and refugee camps. I think that's a winning message. I don't think there is a big cohort of Americans who say, no, I'm not going to vote for you unless you give Itamar Ben-Gvir a 500-pound bomb to drop on a father who just lost his two twins.
We are in total agreement about how it's the politically smart thing to do, and it's probably the right thing to do for her in terms of trying to maximize her chances to win the election.
Mehdi,
I am curious. Yeah, I am curious though. I'm just trying to put myself in. If I was Kamala Harris, vice president to a president who is, in my view, seemingly very much sundowning and having difficulty understanding the stakes, and how regularly he's being humiliated by the Netanyahu administration. He doesn't seem to really kind of register when red lines are crossed or when they're not. And I know part of the administration wants this to happen, but she's the vice president under a ultra-Zionist, rabid anti-Palestinian racist whose brain has ossified to the point where it's not changing. How much can she signal politically without showing Netanyahu that there will be a shift in policy and causing him during this lame duck period to escalate with some place like Iran, or to pull the United States into a quagmire that he knows would cause her issues if she were to come into office? I could be overstating that case, but those are the kinds of things that I think get a little bit left out when we're putting this in the context of electoral politics.
The problem is, and I've had this conversation with a few people, including behind the scenes with people who are involved in this stuff and the decision making. I think there's a danger of playing too much 4D chess or 3D chess, whatever the bloody phrase is, with Netanyahu, because at the end of the day, Netanyahu will do what Netanyahu wants to do, and a lot of what Israel does is driven by domestic politics and by his coalition partners as well. And I just think, look, the reality is you could cut it both ways, Amit. You could argue that if she escalates now, that makes Netanyahu escalate and puts Democrats in a bad position, right, going into election. For example, a full-blown Middle East war does not help the Democrats. Let's just be very clear about that going into a November election. On the other hand, if she doesn't escalate, he's escalating anyways. I mean, they just killed Hania in Tehran, which is an escalation, and the Iranians have so far resisted responding in kind. Let's see how long that lasts. So either way, they could get screwed. The bottom line is, nothing they've done so far has worked. That's the starting point of any conversation. Whatever strategy, the bear hug, the this, the that, the temporary conditioning of aid, the calling of a ceasefire, nothing has worked.
Giving the speech and claiming that Netanyahu, I mean, there's a good TikTok on this, on apparently Biden's aide had him sort of pull back from what they were going to do and trade it for the strategy of claiming that, of going public with what Netanyahu's original sort of like ceasefire deal was, because I guess they thought that he couldn't change his mind again. And of course, he's been doing that time and time again. It's quite clear at this point.
My position from the beginning, and I wrote about this in The Guardian several months ago, is if Ronald Reagan could ring Menachem Begin and get him to stop the bombing of Beirut in 20 minutes, Joe Biden can get Netanyahu to stop it in at least 20 hours or 20 days. It's been.
And the stunning thing is, it seems like even like the Israeli military, to the extent that we've seen reporting in Israel, even the Israeli military is looking for Biden to do that.
Yeah, they want an off-ramp because they know that the strategy is not working. They know that Hamas cannot be defeated. The ridiculous George Bush-style mission accomplished banner ain't coming. You saw a bunch of Israeli security officials, Sam, including Ehud Barak, former prime minister, write an open letter to the Biden administration and to Chuck Schumer saying, don't host Netanyahu. Please don't host him in Congress. So this idea that it was just lefty protesters outside, it was Israel's security establishment saying, please don't host Netanyahu. So the strategy has been a miserable failure. Whatever Biden's remembered for, he'll be remembered as the great enabler of Israel's worst prime minister. And Harris, so to go back to Emma's question, I don't think you need to overthink it. I think anything she does at this point that is not what Biden has done is an improvement. Right? Because whatever the course we're on now is we are barreling towards a disaster, possibly a full-blown regional war. And yes, Netanyahu and co are running down the clock. They're waiting for a Trump victory. They want a Trump victory. The only person who likes Benjamin Netanyahu in America that I can see right now, are the House GOP caucus who love Netanyahu. There is a constituency in America, in American public, in American media, whatever it is, for the president of the United States, and if not the president, then the vice president, presidential candidate, to come out loudly against Netanyahu and talk about how she will not give him the weapons to kill innocent civilians.
I would be very happy with that, and it will be interesting if what tactic she takes, because the protests are escalating and they're going to be quite loud, and as they should be, at the Democratic National Convention this week. So this is not going to be an issue that she can avoid, even if she tries to. And there is a part of me that's sympathetic about a bit of the bind that she's in, being still officially a part of the administration. We kind of parsed some of what Phil Gordon tweeted out the other day about how essentially will always allow for Israel to defend itself against Iran. I'm paraphrasing a bit. But that language felt quite specific. And, she tried to signal some coldness in her meeting with Netanyahu. And these are kinds of things like Trita Parsi picks up on these little nuances. He was writing about this. But from an electoral politics standpoint, to your point, these efforts to have the public read between the lines for her to say, like, I'm not a rabid Palestinian racist in the same way Biden is probably insufficient for these voters, and it should be.
It is insufficient, and fundamentally, just look at American politics over the last few decades. Ronald Reagan stopped Begin. George Bush Sr. went against Shamir. They both took a lot of incoming for doing that, but they did it. Two Republican presidents, to be fair, did it. Democratic presidents since George Bush Sr. have been repeatedly humiliated by one man, Benjamin Netanyahu. Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and now Joe Biden, all been humiliated by one man, Netanyahu. Bill Clinton famously came out of a meeting with Netanyahu and said, who the fuck is the superpower here? So this has been going on for decades. It's a no-brainer that Kamala Harris breaks with that and stands up to Netanyahu.
Just take a step back on the race at all. I mean, it's been sort of crazy how there's been such a massive swing since Biden dropped out. I mean, I think we were advocating for Biden to drop out and for Harris to come in, but I don't think, like, if you had asked us 4 weeks ago, would it be this much of a turnaround? I don't think that we would have said, of course. I think, it was clear they were going to have problems with Harris in terms of attacking her, because, Harris basically is like the cake in a refrigerator, and they want to take a bite of the cake, which is the DEI candidate, but they can't. And so every time they open the fridge, they see the cake there, they shut it quick because they just cannot seem to attack that ticket. What's your sense of what's happened?
First of all, Sam, you're being far too modest, dare I say self-flagellating. I think the three of us should use 4 words constantly, which is "we told you so." I don't think we should be immodest about that. I wrote a piece for The Guardian at the beginning of July saying, step aside. Actually, the night of the debate, I did a video on TikTok, Instagram, literally that night, 11 p.m. saying, he's got to go. I've been defending him for months. I was defending him at MSNBC. I was saying age was an issue. That night, I said, he's got to go. I then wrote a piece for The Guardian saying, not only has he got to go, but it's got to be Kamala Harris who just takes over. Forget all the mini primary, open convention. Just give it to Harris and move on.
We were all aligned on that. Yep.
And people attacked the crap out of me, like the blue anon folks, or whatever you want to call them, blue MAGA, who are the most shameless people I've come across in a long time, and I cover Trump for a living. These are people who, till the bitter end, well, Biden's not going anywhere, and anyone who says Biden should step aside, they're Trump supporters. That's what you are, Mehdi. And then the next day it was, we love Kamala Harris. She's amazing. We've always loved Kamala Harris. It's very 1984-esque who we're fighting the wars with. Sorry, I'm going to keep calling those people out because the shamelessness and the grift is amazing, especially the online partisans. Look, we were right. We said this would happen. Yes, I don't think any of us thought it would happen to this extent. But yeah, I did think that there would be massive enthusiasm for a black woman, for a history-making candidate, for the first woman president, for the first black woman president. I did think there would be a moment to break with Gaza, which she has rhetorically at least managed to do so far, but not in policy terms, as we've discussed. And I did think the Republicans would struggle to attack her because they're lazy and racist and bigoted. They don't really have much. Trump is not the guy he was in 2016. Plus, they don't seem to even plan for it. I think they assumed it would be Biden till the end.
It's amazing. That part is amazing to me.
They had no plan B. They spend millions of dollars on all these consultants who are all grifters on the GOP side, and no one had an attack memo or something ready to go. Trump is running around testing out Kamambla and other such ridiculous nicknames that aren't sticking. They're obsessed with Tim Walz, who is a super popular guy. By the way, can I just say another I told you so? I said, pick Tim Walz. He'd be the guy. No. You can't win Pennsylvania without Shapiro. Kamala Harris is doing very well in Pennsylvania with Tim Walz as her running mate. And they're losing their minds. They have no attack lines against Harris, against Walz, against the Democrats. I just find I'm amused. I'm enjoying it. Look, I'm under no illusion. The support for Harris is soft. It could go away next month. I think the convention will be important. I think defining herself will be important. I think getting the policy lines out are important. I think resolving the Gaza issue in some shape or form will be important. The election is too close to call. Don't get me wrong. As people clip this up later, I'm going to be very clear. Either side could win this election. This is a 50-50 election. But clearly Democrats now have a fighting chance in a way they did not have when they had the old dude still as their candidate.
Right. I mean, it's now, I think, genuinely a 50-50 election, whereas I feel like a month and a half ago, it was sort of like a 48-45 election and not in favor of the Democrats in that instance. So
and you get to say I told you so, Mehdi, in the sense that because this is maybe the first time I feel like us on the left are seeing, when we say this is good strategy for the Democrats to go in this direction, and them actually adopting those strategies and seeing them pay off quite quickly in the results, in the way that polling has shifted. Like this is not Bernie Sanders politics. I'm under no illusions about this, but Kamala Harris
Bernie got this one wrong, to be honest.
Yeah, well, and I was critical of that strategy. He could have been using that time when it was clear Biden was going to drop out to actually leverage some of those policy positions he was thrusting onto Biden, like a 5% increase, capping rent at 5%, which is not in her platform. He could have been using that instead of having Biden come out and do that. But we can relitigate that at another point. I think he's biased because they're personal friends, to be honest. But Harris, like, she's adopting just a standard Democratic Party platform, and Walz coming into the ticket as somebody who, you know, he was a pretty standard Democrat throughout his time in Congress, but has this incredible, you know, he has an anti-Iraq war history. And when he governed in Minnesota, he just decided, I'm going to actually use my political capital here and do things for the people in the time span that I can do it. And reportedly, that was what she liked about him. And that's what gives me excitement about this candidacy, is that the Democrats, maybe for the first time in my entire lifetime, have decided that we're not going to do the triangulation game and hold on to power for power's sake and cut deals with Mitch McConnell and then give ourselves big pats on the back, a big effing deal like Biden said about the Affordable Care Act. We're going to govern, and we're going to try to deliver because, you know, none of this has paid off for us. When we play footsie with corporations, they price gouge for their own profits and then blame our administration.
Well, I'm glad you've highlighted that part of her record, because I do think the single biggest thing she's done and not got enough credit for from the left is picking Tim Walz. That was a huge move. Maybe people don't understand the kind of inside Beltway politics that goes into that. That was a huge move. I did not expect that. Let me just be clear in terms of prediction games. I thought she'll never do it. She'll go with Shapiro. She rejected the candidate who the big donors wanted, who was the guy calling for corporate tax cuts and vouchers for schools, and obviously the position on Israel and BDS and campus protests, which we didn't like. To go against that and say, actually, I'm going to ignore all the consultant class, all the cable news pundits, all the big money donors, and I'm going to go with Walz, that was a big move. And that made me think, oh, she is serious about governing, as you put it.
And I will also say this, just as a closing thing, to get your take on this. The campaign they have been campaigning in a very different way than we've seen Democrats do before. Like, part of it is just, there's a different set of tools than campaigns have had in the past, but they're the ones who keep promoting all the crazy stuff that Vance has said, right? I mean, a lot of this is baked into the cake. People don't, like you say, if Ilhan Omar had said what Trump said over the past couple of days, he would have been run out of the country as an anti-Semite. But Vance, because he's sort of like, new blood in some way, things stick to him more. And it's also a function of a bad mistake that Trump made. But they're putting out all these audio clips of Vance saying just those bad crap, crazy stuff, and not waiting for the media. Yes. Like, there's always been this problem with Democrats where it's like, yes, we just need the media to tell the truth.
No, you need to leave. You need to leave.
But yeah, that's not the way the media works.
No, it's especially on Vance. I mean, they got lucky with having Vance as an opponent rather than a Nikki Haley or whatever it is. I mean, he is one of the most unlikable people I've ever come across. I can only think of one other politician who is uncomfortable in their own skin as JD Vance, and that is Ron DeSantis. And I just think it's very easy to attack the man. I mean, he just makes it so easy. He's got let me use this phrase, rhetorically punchable face. I'm not advocating violence, but in terms of making fun of him, it's very easy. And they're doing it. And not just that, they're going after Trump. They're going after Trump's mental health, which I think is exactly the right thing to do. You look at the polling, the moment that Joe Biden stepped aside, suddenly Trump became the old guy in the race. Trump became the mentally incoherent guy in the game. Trump became the guy who's unfit for office because he's not all there. And I think the Harris campaign have rightly lent into that. People keep saying, well, it's the same campaign, it's the same people. Maybe, but they're certainly doing something differently in terms of their press releases, in terms of the rallies they're holding, in terms of the attack lines. And I would say more of that, please, more of that.
I just wanted to also note, as we were talking about Miriam Adelson wanting to, Trump to annex the West Bank. Next week on Tuesday, I think it is, we're having Jasper Nathaniel on talk about a piece that you guys are publishing of his that about reporting that he had been doing in the West Bank. People might know him as Infinite Jazz on Instagram. And he's been in and out of the West Bank over the past really 6-7 months and has done some great reporting out of there. And I'm looking forward to talking to him about that piece, and good for you guys for publishing it. It's really,
it is a very powerful piece, and it tells you a story about the West Bank that we don't hear often enough.
Indeed. Mehdi Hasan, we're going to put a link to Zeteo, obviously, but also to the new documentary that you guys have put out.
ReelIsrael.film, REEL, ReelIsrael.film. Please do check it out. It's a film that more people need to see.
And thanks again for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Emma.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.